From becoming the youngest UFC champion of all time to winning a fight with a toe hanging off of his foot, these are 12 things that you didn't know about Jon Jones. For number 1, Jon Jones is not someone who you want to try stealing from, because one night back in 2020, someone tried to rob one of Jon's cars at his house, and let's just say things didn't go quite to plan for the thief. Just seconds after entering one of Jon's cars, Jon was alerted by the alarm system on his phone, and he quickly opened up the garage door to see what was going on. The thief clearly got spooked and ran off, but instead of calling the police, Jon took measures into his own hands and grabbed his shotgun, chasing the thief down. Jon posted the video online for everyone to see, explaining that he actually caught the thief, stating, "Next time you try to rob someone, make sure you're fast enough to outrun them." He didn't actually pull the trigger, but explained in an interview that he had even exchanged some words with the thief and told him to never come to his house ever again, and that he's lucky I'm smart enough to not shoot a man while he's retreating. But this wouldn't be the first time Jon Jones made the headlines, and this brings us to number 2, because back in 2008, Jon Jones had his UFC debut fight against Andre Guzmão, to which he won by a unanimous decision. This wasn't any ordinary debut fight, because Jon, who was 21 at the time, had only been training MMA for 9 months before making it into the UFC, making him the least experienced fighter to not only fight, but win in his debut. But there was no other option for Jon, because he had already been making a huge name for himself in the underground scene, and had already racked up 6 professional fights, to which he won all of them in the 4 months prior. And what happened just a few years later would change the UFC forever, because Jon Jones was about to face a death sentence. Here is number 3. In 2011, Jon's training partner Rashad Evans was set up to fight the defending light heavyweight champion Shogun Rua for the belt, but just prior to the fight, Evans suffered a knee injury and was unable to make an appearance. So, Jon, as a heavy underdog, was given the opportunity to take his spot in the fight, and of course, he stepped up, and he was not going to disappoint, because not only was Jon the least experienced fighter about to compete for a UFC title, but he then went on to defeat Shogun by TKO in the 3rd round, making him the youngest UFC champion of all time at the age of 23. But it's what happened right before the fight that people just could not believe. This is number 4. Just hours before due to fight Shogun, Jon was visiting a New Jersey waterfall to meditate and get in zone for the fight. When he pulled up to the car park, his coach warned him that they were in a bad neighborhood and had to be careful because a lot of people got mugged in the area. Well, seconds later, he witnessed a woman getting mugged in broad daylight. So Jon, doing what he does, chased the mugger down and held him down until the police came.
So the police come get out of his car and he's like, "What are you doing here? Like, aren't you fighting tonight?" And I'm like, "Yeah, man, I was trying to get my meditation."
So anyway, what happened to Jones just a few fights later definitely had fans' stomachs turning, because he later fought Chael Sonnen at UFC 159 in 2013, where Jon was defending his light heavyweight belt. To say the least, Jon dominated the fight and ended Sonnen in round 1 to a TKO. But when getting interviewed by Joe Rogan after the fight, he noticed something that would leave anyone feeling disturbed.
All right, I'm here with the champ. Oh, he's got a broken foot. All right, have a seat. All right, champ. First of all,
Jon had actually broken his big toe at some point in the fight, and the toe was basically hanging off the foot by a thread. The injury was pretty gruesome, so check it out at your own risk. And for number 6 on the list, Jon was super embarrassed about his past, because before Jon made the UFC, he made a nickname for himself that he would later completely regret.
Johnny Bones, aka Sexual Chocolate Jones.
Yep, you heard that right. Anyway, Jon was quick to remove the nickname after he realized it probably wasn't as cool as what he had originally thought in his head. He tweeted a few years later, "My original fight nickname used to be Sexual Chocolate. What in the hell was I thinking?" So instead, he just ran with his original nickname, Bones, which came from his high school football days that made fun of his tall but skinny frame. The nickname suited perfectly at the time because his brother was nicknamed Beefy for his bigger frame. And speaking of Jon's brothers, this brings us to number 7, because not just one, but both of Jon's brothers, Chandler and Arthur, are superstar football players in the NFL.
The New England Patriots select Chandler.
Chandler is currently a defensive end for the Las Vegas Raiders, and Arthur was also a defensive end for several NFL clubs over 7 seasons before he retired in 2017. And both of the brothers have earned the title of Super Bowl champions, so clearly being a champion runs in the Jones blood. However, Jon Jones has a very weird ritual with his champion title, and this brings us to number 8, because despite being considerably the GOAT of MMA and holding a championship belt for almost all of his career, Jon Jones did something that most champions could never.
I had this crazy thing that I would do where I would party 1 week before every fight, and I did it throughout my whole career. 1 week before every fight, I would go out and I would get blacked out wasted.
But no matter what you think, Jon has only ever lost 1 fight in his career, so who are we to judge? Jon even went on saying that he stopped the ritual in 2016, and in his first fight where he didn't party the week before, he actually had his worst performance. And speaking about Jon's only loss in his UFC career, most people don't even consider it a true loss. Because back in 2009, Jon was fighting Matt Hamill in the Ultimate Fighter Heavyweights finale. Jon was absolutely destroying Matt in the fight, and towards the end of the fight, had Matt pinned down before he started unleashing elbows on him. Unfortunately for Jon, he began throwing 12-6 elbows, which are actually illegal in the UFC, and therefore the referee intervened and momentarily stopped the fight, taking a point from Jon for the illegal elbows. The referee went on to resume the fight before seeing the state of Matt and ending the fight, declaring Jon Jones as the winner. However, right as Jon was prepared to be announced as the winner, this happened.
Due to intentional elbows, there's been a disqualification of Johnny Bones Jones. Therefore, the winner is Matt Hamill.
Wow.
So yeah. Anyway, Jon's intentions outside the ring show that he's more a guy of peace than anything. And that brings us to number 11. Jon Jones' dad is actually a pastor at the Mount Sinai Church in New York. And before starting MMA, Jon was heavily considering following his father's footsteps in becoming a pastor. His dad was super supportive of the idea. However, when introduced to MMA, Jon clearly saw where his destiny lied, and he chose to instead pursue his career as an MMA fighter. His dad said he tried to discourage Jon from being a fighter, but obviously Jon's mind was already set. And that brings us to something that no UFC fighter has ever achieved before Jon. Because in 2012, after making a huge early statement in the UFC, Jon Jones earned himself a deal with Nike, making him the first ever UFC athlete to get signed by the world-leading sports brand. The following year, Nike released a signature shoe inspired by Jon Jones called the Nike Free Trainer 5.0 Jon Bones Jones. And the shoe was a massive success that sold out just seconds after being released. But unfortunately for Jon, his partnership with Nike wasn't going to last, because just shortly after, Jon Jones was due to fight Daniel Cormier at UFC 178 in 2014. However, during a face-off at one of the press conferences before the event, the two got into a physical fight and Jon ended up punching Cormier. Jon's partnership with Nike was terminated shortly after. However, Nike or Jon never gave an explanation behind the departure. If you enjoyed this video, check out our video on some of the weirdest accessories that the UFC has completely banned. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel for more videos to come.